This week, Kumar talks with colorist Jose Villarrubia about working with Alan Moore, why recolored reprint comics often look gaudy, the upcoming new Dark Horse editions of Richard Corben's Den that he's been working on, why Corben seems to have more of a following in Europe than in the US, and more. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. Deconstructing Comics earns a bit of money from your purchase that helps us keep the show going. We really appreciate your support. This is Tim, and this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics, and now here's Kumar's talk with Jose Villarrubia.
Okay, hello. So I'm here with Jose Villarrubia. Have I pronounced that correctly? I should have asked you that before.
Yes, you have.
Okay. So I know you mostly as a colorist of comics, but the first thing I ever saw you on was Mirror of Love. This is a photo. Okay, so it's from 2004. It's an adaptation of an Alan Moore comic. It's the prose, but it's redone as a kind of, I don't know, would you describe it as a photo? Not essay, photo. I don't. It's a collage, not even a collage. But anyway, you've taken the text of the Alan Moore work, and given sections of it photographs. So I thought you were some kind of photo artist or something, and I guess you maybe are or still are. But what was your background? Do you have an art education background, or it's self-taught, or how did you get into it?
So I had a long education in art. I started taking private lessons when I was 12. I went to the University of Madrid. I later transferred to the Maryland Institute, which is the school where I now teach, and I got my degree in fine arts from there. After that, I did a Master's of Fine Arts degree in painting, and soon after, I spent about 10 years doing fine art photography. So when the idea of illustrating Mirror of Love was proposed, I immediately thought it would be interesting to do it as a book that had photo illustrations, but computer manipulated some of them, and to have more control over what the images look like. So I sketched everything. I shot some samples and I showed them to Alan. He really liked them, and the rest is history.
So it was your proposal, or did somebody come to you with? Okay.
No, it was my idea. I already had approached Alan about doing the same thing with his first novel, with Voice of the Fire.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And found a publisher for it, which was Top Shelf.
Yes.
And then a French friend suggested that maybe I could do Mirror of Love as a book, and I thought it was a good idea, as long as Alan was okay with it. And so we asked him, and he said yes. He was very enthusiastic about it.
Okay. And had you already started comic book coloring before this point, or was this your
Oh yeah,
first connection with? Okay.
No, I had already been coloring comics for a little while.
Okay.
I started coloring comics with Jay Lee, who was just getting started in his career at the time. He started working for Image Comics, and he wanted someone who could actually paint his colors. And so he knew I was a painter, and we had become really good friends. So I learned Photoshop in order to be able to color his work.
Okay.
And I had done that for a little while by the time that I met Alan and so forth.
Okay, so would this be in the late 90s that you started coloring Jay Lee's work? Something like that? Was it Inhumans, or what series?
No, it was Hellshock for Image.
Oh, Hellshock. Okay, right. Okay.
We did 2 series, and Humans is when he went to Marvel, and he wanted me to color it, but Marvel said no.
Okay.
And so the first thing I did with him for Marvel was called The Sentry.
Okay.
And then we worked with Graham Morrison and did Fantastic Four 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay. Okay. And so you basically got into comics through knowing Jay Lee. So you weren't really trying to get into comics. You were invited, I guess, by Jay Lee. Is this how you describe it?
I got it professional. I mean, I've always been a fan. I wanted to be a comics artist, but I gave up on it really early. And I had a taste of it because one of my students was Greg LaRocque,
Okay.
who was working in The Flash and Legion of Superheroes at the time. So he got me, he asked me if I wanted to do some comic book drawing. I said yes. And I did some work for Who is Who in the Legion of Superheroes.
Okay.
Offered to do a story after that, and I turned it down.
Okay.
But then Jay asked me to color, which I had never considered. And I said yes. And then Stephen John Phillips, who's a friend and local photographer, wanted to do a graphic novel, sort of inspired by some of the work that Dave McKeon was doing at the time, mixing photography and mixed media via Photoshop.
Mm-hmm.
Since I had just learned Photoshop, I said yes. And we did this mixed media fumetti called Veils.
Okay.
And Alan really liked it. And that's why he wrote that fumetti portion of Promethea for me to illustrate.
Right. Okay. I was going to ask about that. Yeah. So again, that was Alan approached you because he knew your work from Veils and Mirror of Love. Okay.
I think we hadn't done Mirror of Love yet. I think I did for Mirror of Love.
Okay. Okay. So was when you got your formal art education, what was your end goal? What did you hope to be doing as professionally?
I didn't have a goal. I just wanted to make art.
Yeah.
And media was not important to me. That's why I was a general fine arts major, because I liked drawing and painting, but I also liked printmaking a lot. I enjoyed sculpture, and I like both commercial and fine art, and I like photography. So, to me, it wasn't really about what the materials were. It was more about the kind of imagery that I wanted to make.
Right. Because I've seen sometimes on Facebook you post pieces of your collection, like there's paintings, there's sculptures, there's a bit of everything.
Yes, eventually I've been able to acquire a little collection of things and just things that I like. I don't do it as an investment. I don't do it to impress anybody. I just do it because they give me pleasure.
Yeah. And what was your interest in comics? Was that from when you were really little?
Yes.
Okay.
In my generation in Spain, everybody read comics.
Yeah.
And all the children read comics. Comics were kind of like children's books. Everybody had them. And there were a lot of comics for children. So everybody read them. And then and not everybody, like, we would all read children's comics, but not everybody would read like comics for teenagers. That was just some of the kids. And so, but I never stopped reading. And my brothers read comics too. Like, we all read comics and we all shared it and we all talk about it. But when I was a kid, I could talk about Tintin with any kid at school, or, Mafalda, or like a number of comics that everybody read.
So when did you, or how did you get exposed to the other really advanced European stuff? I guess it must have been pretty easy to access in Spain, all the, like, Drouet and all those kind of the really famous Metal Hurlant guys.
I've just been posting about it. It all happened very fast, but, when I think about it at the time, of course, when you're a kid, like 6 months seems like an eternity.
Yeah.
So, but it all happened very fast. I remember discovering Marvel Comics, discovering DC Comics in translations from Mexico, and then becoming really hooked on that, and then discovering Drouet through that book I posted the other day, Ragael. Then there was a magazine sponsored by the Spanish government called Trinca.
Okay.
That was an imitation of, I guess, Pilot. And it was printed on slick paper, and that's Palacios and Victor de la Fuente, Miguel Calatayud. All of them did amazing work there. And that was an eye-opener. And then I joined a comic book club that was mostly professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I went to one meeting.
How old do you think you were at the time?
14.
Okay.
May have turned 15, 14, 15, something like that. I remember we met in the back of a club, which may have been a gay club, but those were illegal in Spain at the time, so I didn't even. But it was a lot of professionals and hardcore fans. Everybody was older than me, but I remember that's where I discovered Bernie Wrightson, for example.
Right. Okay.
I remember I traded some comics for some Barry Smith Conans there, and through those circles, I started to do drawings for fanzines, and I did a little bit of that, and then I moved to the States, and that stopped altogether.
Right. Okay. Right. What was let's go back to the Promethea issues for a little bit. So what was the process for making these photo comics? Did you have to hire models and go through that, or were they people you knew? And how long did it take you to do all the photography and the photoshopping and all that kind of stuff?
Took a long time.
Yeah.
No, there was zero budget.
Right.
So there's no hiring anybody.
Okay.
It was all favors. I had, it was all friends who modeled for me, and the girl who played Promethea is a concert pianist. The girl who played Stacia was a driver at Mica, where I was teaching. My friend did the hair and makeup for it. Another friend made the costumes.
Wow.
It was all favors.
Okay.
Alan actually worked in a different way from the way he normally works.
Okay.
On this. He actually, because he knew it was going to take me longer than drawing it, he actually wrote, not quite Marvel style, but he wrote what the images should be like.
Oh, interesting.
Without dialogue.
Okay.
And he faxed it to me. I had the faxes somewhere. I found them the other day. I think I posted them on Facebook.
Okay.
And I thought they had been lost. So it's a pretty detailed description. And he gave me a little bit of an idea about the page layouts, but I had a little bit of flexibility. There was a page I couldn't figure out, and I remember I asked Jay how to do it, and he did in 5 seconds. He did a perfect sketch that I used.
Okay.
And so I drew the whole thing. I drew it like more than layouts, like pretty tight pencils, but out of my head. So, and then I had that approved by the editor, which was Scott Doombeer. And then I recreated what I had drawn photographically and later in Photoshop.
Okay. So do you think it was it took a few months it was 2 issues, I think? Was it 3, 2?
No, it was just one. It
just
was
the one, okay.
I had other contributions to Promethea, but that was the biggest one. Yeah. I remember I took all the work here, all the photographs here, and then I took it home to Spain, and I remember spending Christmas doing it in Madrid, about a month. So probably a couple months, a month of shooting and a month of digital post-production.
Yeah.
I used to work with Pine on putting like translucent word balloons, and with J.H. Williams, because the scene sort of had to blend in the beginning and in the end with his line art.
Yeah, incredibly complicated. Sounds even more complicated than I mean, it's easy to read in 30 minutes.
It wasn't that complicated. It's just a little bit time consuming. Photoshop was not what it is now.
Yeah.
And it was harder to work in high resolution, and it was a bit of a technically it was a little bit more challenging than it would be to do it right now, but it wasn't that bad.
Yeah. So in terms of comic book coloring, I know you're teaching as well, but how is this like a really, I don't know what coloring's like. Is it steady work? Are there busy times and less busy times, or what's it like for you?
Well, I'm a freelancer.
Yeah.
So anyone who's a freelancer, you have overlapping projects, and sometimes more than others. I have been pretty consistent in the amount of work I've been doing since shortly after I started working with Marvel with Jay. And I've done longer and shorter projects. I've done a lot of covers. I've done a lot of one-shots. I've done a lot of mini-series. I haven't done like long series. I've done like the most I've done of any series has been Sweet Tooth, which I did almost all of the issues, but that's an exception. Most everything else, I've done story arcs or up to 12 issues. And I'm always coloring a few things, never one thing only.
Yeah.
Sometimes with very tight deadlines, sometimes with very more comfortable deadlines.
Yeah. So you said initially Marvel said no, but then they said yes for Century, I'm guessing. So do you know what changed, or?
Yes, I know what changed.
Okay.
So Jay was really insistent.
Okay.
And other artists starting to ask for me.
Okay.
Precisely because I was different.
Right.
Which was the reason why they were reticent to hire me to begin with, because I'm different.
Yeah, right.
They didn't think different was commercial. They said my work was too artistic.
So. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Which kind of leads me to talking about the recoloring, which is a thing that you post about a lot on Facebook, which is the recoloring of older comics from the newsprint days, and how they're not being colored correctly. And you've been kind of a big advocate of correct coloring. Now, I'm guilty of this myself because I reread, when I read Swamp Thing in trade paperback form, I was in love with the greens, and now I'm colorblind somewhat, but I thought they were really lovely until it was revealed to me that they're not really Tatiana Wood's correct colors. Now, we're on an audio podcast, so it's going to be a little bit hard to talk about. I do want to talk about what's going on with the reprint coloring. So I guess we can say the main problem is that the colors are too bright. Is that the simplest way to put it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what do you think is why is this happening? Why do the publishers want this? Why do the readers want this? Do you have any insight of what you think is happening?
I know what's happening.
Okay.
So basically, when comics were printed in newsprint is kind of gray color.
Yeah.
It's not white. And it's very porous because it's made out of pulp.
Yeah.
And so it absorbs ink in such a way that it makes the colors duller than if they're printed on coated stock on shiny white paper. And so what happened is, in order to get the pages to look good, colorists at the time, they would ask the printer to use very bright colors that they knew that once they were printed, they would blend in and look nice together. So that's how comics were done forever. And then once better paper was being used for reprinting, instead of adjusting the color to what it looked like printed, they just used the original colors, which once you printed them in white paper, they look really bright, but not as bright as they would look later on when they were actually copied in Photoshop and printed in even newer editions, which were even more saturated than early reprints. Editors are not art trained. They're not art directors. They don't have a degree in art. They mostly come from writing. And so, and there's this idea popularized by Roy Lichtenstein and Andy Warhol that comics are these little garish things.
Right.
And they're supposed to be garish and they're supposed to be trashy because that's how, in his own eyes, somebody like Lichtenstein, quote unquote, elevated by doing shitty copies and putting them in a gallery.
Yeah.
But that's another conversation. But anyway, that has stayed in the popular conscience or subconscious. Okay. And so when they've done reprints, they color them as bright as you possibly can. Retailers like them because it's a colorful product.
Right.
Readers have never seen the work looking any other way. So, and then some readers just don't really care about the colors. Some readers, they just want to read the stories they read when they were little, and they hear that they're like amped out like crazy. So that's the reason why the bulk of mainstream comics, it's printed with garish colors. Reprinted.
Yes, reprinted. Have you seen anything that's reprinted that you feel the colors are well done?
Oh yes, there's a lot.
Yeah,
I've written about it a lot. There's an restorer named Alan Harvey who's been doing amazing work. He did about the Atlas War books.
Okay.
In terms of comic strips, there's a ton of quality reprints. Peter Moreska, who does the Sunday Press comics, the Big Little Nemo and all that stuff. He's done Flash Gordon for Titan Comics. And it looks amazing. There is anything that's reprinted by Fantagraphics and Drawn Quarterly and the Library of American Comics with IDW. All those books are impeccable. They had to take slightly different approaches depending on the project, but they're all tremendous. So yeah, there's a lot of really high quality color restoration.
Yeah,
it's just not in the superheroes.
Right. Did you get a look at that Weapon X, the Windsor Smith?
Yes, I have it right here.
Yeah. What did you think about that one? What's your evaluation?
It was a huge improvement.
Yeah.
It's a huge improvement. I think that Barry Windsor Smith may have supervised it himself. But I think that it was done very, very carefully. Extremely challenging material to restore because Barry Windsor Smith used so many different colors in each page, but they really adjusted the colors. So it's not exactly like the newsprint version, but that's okay. It's pretty close. And the newsprint version, depending on the copy you have, it looks different. They were not consistent.
Right.
Runs, they would change.
Yeah.
So I thought it was very well done and a really good effort that I hope they do more. I mean, after that, they did The Kree's Cold War by Roy Thomas and Neil Adams, and they used the same large format, but with the eye-burning colors. So I don't think that they really plan to do it much more often. So
right. And also, did you happen to read any of the Dark Horse EC Comics reprints? Because there's a statement in there that says we've tried to preserve Mary Severin's colors. I'm not sure how true that is, but I do think it's a bit true. It's a bit frightening that it's really the work of a lot of female artists that are kind of being erased in this process as well. I think that's another factor of it.
100%. Like I've written about it in my posts extensively. But Glynis Oliver and Marie Severin and
Tatiana Wood. Yeah.
Tatiana Wood. There were a lot of really amazing color artists that did so much with so little, and they're being erased. So the EC Comics, I don't have those volumes, but I look through them. They don't look anything like the original color, so I have no idea what they're talking about. They wrote it in some vague way, saying that they were trying to preserve the spirit or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, they have all this digital airbrush rendering that was never there to begin with, and it's like, okay, it's bad. I mean, I have all that EC stuff in black and white in the little photographic books, and I'm very happy with those.
Yeah.
Coming up, Jose talks about working on restoring Richard Corben's work and what Corben fans can look forward to in the new edition of Den coming from Dark Horse. Why does Corben seem to have more of a following in Europe than in the US? And more. But first, a reminder to join us for 20th Century TV and music trivia quiz videos and more on our Patreon page. Every month, patrons donating $4 a month or more also get a full-length podcast episode reviewing an issue of The Amazing Spider-Man from the 1960s. Check out our goals and rewards at patreon.com/deconcomics. If you'd rather give a one-time donation, you can do so via PayPal by sending it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support.
Greetings from Wayne Manor Memoirs, a podcast dedicated to exploring the Batman mythos.
Each episode, we research a character, story, contributor, or piece of pop culture related or adjacent to the Dark Knight,
and try to understand why these topics are important to the Bat mythos. I'm Joe.
I'm Kendall, and some of our favorite topics include the transformation of Mr. Zero into Mr. Freeze,
the early appearances of the Riddler,
Booster Gold,
Commandi,
Jim Aparo,
and many, many more. Check out Wayne Manor Memoirs every other Friday, wherever you download your podcasts.
And follow us at Wayne Manor Memoirs on Facebook or at W Memoirs on Twitter.
Until next time, Bat Fanatics, be brave
and stay bold.
Okay, well, that leads us into your work restoring the Richard Corben stuff. But you started working with him when he was alive. Yeah. So what were you first? How did that connection happen? And what was the first stuff you colored of his work?
When Axel Alonso moved to Marvel, Axel was one of the, well, it was really just Axel, that mainstream editors that had offered him work, Richard Corben work, working for Vertigo, and he did a remarkable run of Hellblazer.
Yeah.
And after he moved to Marvel, Axel, and became editor-in-chief, he asked Corben to come, and he had him do a Hulk miniseries.
Yeah.
I would talk to Axel a lot, and I know he loved Corben because he had been so public about it, and he knew I loved Corben because I told him. So I remember asking him to let me color the Hulk, but he was already assigned. So after that came out, the follow-up project was Cage.
Yeah.
And he was either going to go with the other colorists, which is this team of Mexican colorists. But instead he offered it to me, and he gave them another job. And so that's how I first started working with Corben. And it was really, I was a little bit intimidated, but he was extremely nice and supportive. And he even did a tutorial for me and everything. So it was really nice.
Okay. And then the Creepy Presents volume came out from Dark Horse, which, now, did you volunteer for this and do it for free, or what?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, oh my goodness, I never thought I would talk about it, but it's true. Yeah, I'm friends with the editor that was in charge of those books.
That Phil Simon? Right, okay.
Because I was working on Conan.
Yeah.
He was my editor in Conan. And so I told him, please, when you get the Corben stories, let me do them.
Yeah.
And he's like, yes. And there was no budget. it wasn't that they didn't pay me, it's that there was no budget.
Okay.
It was like book was budgeted to be like getting the old magazines, scanning them, cleaning them up digitally, and putting them out, and that's it. But of course, that happened. That the Warren comics in black and white look pretty good,
Right.
so you can with the black and white pages, and they look really decent. But Corben had this way of coloring his work with handmade color separations, and most of the time, the printing in his stories left a lot to be desired. So I asked him if I could do that. He said yes. In order to compensate me, he commissioned for me to write the introduction.
Okay.
Which was nice of him to do. And Corben liked the introduction. And Corben helped me by sending me a bunch of his original pages scanned so I could actually incorporate the line art or tone, actually, with printed colors. And I had to experiment a lot. But it was so much fun. So he was happy with the results. And that was that. And then Dark Horse went back to scanning printed pages and not using originals.
Okay. So you had all the originals, or
no, not all.
Okay.
Some of them.
Because then there was a second edition that came out, right, with a few more stories were fixed up. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
There were, because I found some pages after the first one came out, and I said, let me put some more pages, like one in Child and some other ones. Yeah. And then even more pages were fixed for the French edition from Delirium.
Right.
And then the editor in Delirium, Laurent, found a whole bunch of stories that are in France.
Right.
You're a Big Girl Now and stuff. And that was incorporated. So the French edition, the last one he did after the Angoulême Corben exhibition, has about 80 more pages.
Whoa. Okay. Wow. Well, so that actually kind of leads me to the appeal of Corben in Europe versus the US. And I feel like he's kind of unknown in the US. And I feel like, even though he's from Kansas, I get the impression that he's really kind of a respected, maybe even a giant in Europe. So were you exposed to him as when you're 14, 15, when you're starting to get that other stuff? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was exposed to him, when I started, around the same time as Moebius and Bernie Wrightson and all that stuff. Andrew Late. I don't know what's the first things. I think the first things I saw by him were reprints of his Warren stories.
Okay. Which
I would pull them out of the comic and I would throw out the rest, and I would just keep the Corben pages.
Yeah.
I'm guilty. I use them for the restoration. And then of course, when he started doing Den, that was like,
yeah, right,
mind blown. I remember I bought a little book that was a history of comics written by a Spanish critic. It was a paperback, and it was black and white, and it talked about Bloodstar as like the thing, like the cutting edge in comics, because it was a graphic novel. And I remember ordering a copy of Bloodstar from Spain that I was able to acquire.
Do you have any guesses as to why his appeal is different in Europe versus the US? Have you ever thought about it?
Yes.
What do you think is the cause of the difference?
Very simple.
Yeah.
It's not complex at all.
Okay.
Europeans follow creators.
Right.
Americans follow characters.
Right.
That's the reason. He's definitely an auteur because he has a singular vision. But he's not the only auteur that so when you talk about like what are the icons of European comics, and you think of like Hugo Pratt, you think of Moebius, you think of Bilal, you think of
Krepax,
you think of Manara, you think of like who are like the iconic. You think who are the iconic creators in America, and they're all tied to properties. So like Spider-Man,
right?
Superman and Batman, and There's no that emphasis on who. I mean, after all, it is the French that came up with the whole auteur.
Yeah.
With the New Vague. That I think extended to other forms of entertainment. And I think even though people don't intellectualize it, they know that they want to buy a comic regardless of what it is about, because whoever they like created it. Whereas in this country, it's not the same way. I mean, Jim Lee is very popular when he does Batman or X-Men, but when he's done other projects that were not that, it just wasn't reflected in the impact it had.
Yeah.
Even Frank Miller, if he's not doing like either characters or Sin City or something, and that's just the American market, the American public. It's I think it's the Walt Disney tradition, like Walt Disney presents. Like Stan Lee really did a lot of, I would say, damage by perpetuating the Stan Lee presents in all of the Marvel comics. And so people are really attached to characters here.
Yeah. Do you think it's changing because we're about to get your restoration of Dan? Do we feel like the audience's taste is maybe changing, or is it just a hope?
I mean, I don't know, because there are many audiences for comics.
Yeah.
I work as an educator, as you know, and I have so many great students that make comics, and some of them go on to become really good professionals. And most of them haven't read a whole lot of comics. They have read a lot of manga and web comics and stuff, indie stuff. So whoever follows those things, they don't really follow characters because we're talking about international comics to begin with. And I think that, but then, you talk about people who are like 50 and over, and that's like, a different generation altogether. That's mostly guys, that's like their characters, et cetera, et cetera. And there's another in-between generation that are like the fans that really, really love the Marvel movies, and some really love the DC movies. And they have interest in those characters because they like the movies. So I don't know if they're ever going to be interested in creators. I remember many years ago, I was in a club, and I saw some bar acquaintance who I knew liked comics, and he asked me how I was doing, and I said, he's like, "Are you working on anything good?" I said, "Yes, I'm actually working on something very good." And he said, "What is it?" I said, "I'm going to be doing Fantastic Four." He said, "Oh, that's very cool. Who's in the book?" And I said, "Well, it's Grant Morrison is writing it. Jay Lee is drawing and inking it, and I'm coloring." And he said to me, "I don't give a shit. Who are the characters in the book?"
Yeah, right.
When he said who's in the book, it's like he wanted to know if the Human Torch was in the book or not.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, and I told him everybody's in the book.
Yeah.
So, but that's a typical, I would say, consumer of a certain generation. And so I think that the Corben books, I'm just curious to see what reception they're going to have.
Right.
Because then in particular has so much nudity.
Yeah.
That's extremely unusual period in any kind of entertainment media and from any country. And so, and the nudity then is extremely casual, but it's very exaggerated and very realistically depicted. So I have no idea how that in 2023, I always felt it was like a hippie thing. When it came out in the late 60s. Yeah. Like Make Love Not War and all that stuff. Like, and the end of the final act of Hair when they all take their clothes off and stuff like that. And the streakers that be a form of protest and skinny dipping and all that stuff. Like, there was definitely a move towards nudity during those decades that then sort of like once Reagan was elected and anti-feminism began, and it's like the whole backlash against progressiveness that enjoying your body sort of ended in the States.
Yeah.
So whereas in Europe, well, most beaches are topless and there's tons of nudist stuff. Here it's like you have to sign up a card and go to a club to do it. It's a big, dirty secret. So, and I think that even though 99% of his work doesn't have nudity, it is then that is his most well-known character, and that has, in the first 2 volumes only, it has a lot of nudity. And because it was adapted in the heavy metal movie, and Americans became extremely puritanical about nudity. They only could understand nudity as belonging in pornography. In a way that Europeans never did. Then I think that's actually, in his case in particular, contributed to his lack of sufficient recognition.
Right. So I've got three dens. I've got the Fantagor, the Catalan, and the Ariel books. Now, what's going to be different about this one that's coming out from Dark Horse in a few months?
Oh my God, it's so much better than any of those.
Okay.
The Corben never sold his original art to Den.
Okay.
So Corben's widow, Donna, has all of the Corben original pages.
Okay.
So I knew this coming in. So she actually scanned everything for me at very high resolution. So I was working from the actual sources. So I would say, on average, each page has about 25% more detail than any of those. Yes, like little subtle textures and teeny things.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
And, well, I've been seeing the art you've been putting on Facebook, and it's really freaking me out because I'm so excited for it, and I still feel like I have to wait another 6 months or something, and pre-orders are already going. I've already ordered mine, but I'm still have to wait, and then I have to wait for Den 2. So it's been seeing the art difference has really been kind of driving me crazy. But it's interesting because the Fantagor one would have been published by Corben himself, and I feel like even he was struggling to get the technology to do what he wanted with all of the Fantagor books, even the black and white ones. It seemed like he couldn't get the printers to do what he wanted, or get the computer to do what he wanted, or.
It's true, and I feel like of those 3, I feel that except for the beginning, the first chapter, but after that, the Ariel book is really nicely printed. The other 2 are very similar to each other, but they have that extra chapter at the end, which actually didn't print as well as it should have. That extra chapter was the one that I got most corrections from Donna, because Donna knows exactly what her husband wanted. So she gave me some of the figures are dark in the story, and there's some adjustments that you will see. Now it's been relettered, which thank God. And the formatting and the gutters has been cleaned. The first story is the one that suffers the most in those editions you showed me, because it was done for an underground comic. And when it was reformatted to be used, there were some things that burnt out. So you will see details that had never been printed. The second volume, actually, I thought it was going to be much easier, and it actually turned out to be a much bigger challenge, because I use my Catalan edition as a model, and then I was not. She couldn't put her finger into it, but she just kept telling me that it just wasn't quite right.
Okay.
I wrecked my brain because I just didn't know what it was, and then I discovered that the Catalan edition, which is a really nice, book, it's really washed out.
Yeah, right.
So then I actually went to another edition and to the heavy metal printings of those, and I adjusted the pages with those, and now it looks better than it's ever looked, because the heavy metal was too dark, and the collections were too light.
Oh, okay.
So this volume 2 looks like when I was like adjusting them, I was like telling Donna, it really looks like Corben now.
Yeah.
She's like, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
And then for volume 3, which I need to do 2 more pages that I'm waiting for the originals for. And that's the one that they sold the pages.
Okay.
And so for volume 3, fortunately, I bought a lot.
Okay.
Those were very easy to.
But is it going to be? I didn't realize that he had all the pages for 1 and 2. But how hard is it going to be to find pages for the later volumes? Do we know where they are?
Donna has them.
Okay.
Yeah, volume 3 was the only one that was a big challenge.
Oh, I see. Okay.
They were sold, but I tracked everything internationally, like a spy. There's a page that has disappeared because the person who bought it left no trace, but it's a really easy to restore, and it looks so good. It looks, and then 4, 5, 6, etc. That's those are. It's going to be hard when we do Arabian Nights, when we do other.
Yeah. So are we? You're making it sound. You're getting me very excited because you're making it sound like it's really going to happen. Are we? Are we sure these books are going to happen, or do we have to wait for the sales on Den 1 and 2, or?
I think yes and yes.
Okay.
I mean, they should happen, but if it's a disaster, then they may not happen. I don't know.
I think it has to, because I feel like I see a lot of hardcover prestige books being printed that seem like they have a small market, and I feel like this would. I feel when I look at Den, for me it's impossible to deny its greatness. Like you wouldn't not want to buy it when just flipping through it. But the other one is what's going on with Bloodstar. Now I know we've had a French edition from Delirium, but do you think we're going to see an English one, and whose hands is that decision in?
So Bloodstar was it was done as work for hire by Corben, and so the person who commissioned it has all the originals.
Okay.
So I have been tracking him down for a long time, and so has the French editor. And finally, it was agreed that I would go up to New York, scan the work, digitally clean it up, so that there would be a digital version, and the French edition could happen, and any other editions. So I did that. And the book is right now, it's been in negotiations forever to come out in English and in other languages, but it's not owned by the Corben estate.
Right.
So it's in the hands of the owner, and, who says these things will happen, but I just don't know what kind of timeline.
Okay. And the other giant, or I guess a short giant, is Ralph, which I feel like needs a really nice addition. And I think you said on your Facebook you're hoping or working on the underground stuff.
I'm been pushing like crazy. That's for sure.
Okay.
I feel like there should be 4 books collecting all the underground, and I already proposed them. Rolf is his first masterpiece, as you know. Fortunately with Rolf, all the original art was split between Guillermo del Toro and the Spanish director.
Okay.
And Guillermo del Toro has tweeted some nice things about me, so I talked to him and I asked him if he would give us like scans of his Rolf and Arabian Night pages. He said absolutely.
Oh, he's got the Arabian Night pages.
Not all of them.
Oh, some of them. Okay.
He's smithereen of them.
Okay.
That's going to be like detective work.
Yeah.
But he has Rolf.
Okay.
and his friend Santiago Segura has the other half. So I would like Ralph to be, Corben intended it to be part of a trilogy, which was The Beast of Wolfton and Spirit of the Beast. And I'd like it to be printed with those. I actually would like it to be printed with Oteg, which is how it came out in France. Yeah. And I just got a really nice version of Oteg, which looks terrible normally, but it cost me an arm and a leg to get that rubber crumb thing. And with Necromancer, which was the third Razar story, which is very dark, is not funny like the first two. And I think it would fit really nicely into a 100-page volume with those. So I think that the undergrounds in particular, they really are going to see, they're going to wait and see how the mainstreamish, if you can call that, how it works in terms of sales, because they would have much more limited appeal.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your teaching a little bit to finish up. So, what's your? How much are you teaching? What kind of courses? What are they? Are you teaching the youngest students, or is it a whole mix of people? Or can you talk a little bit about your
teaching for a long time? And I'm 61 years old, and I started teaching when I was 24.
Wow.
Yeah. I for the past 24 years. I've been a full-time college professor, and I teach at a school called the Maryland Institute College of Art that people know as MICA, and is my alma mater. But I actually went away to do my master's. I taught in another state school for 13 years, and then I came back to teach at MICA. I was hired first by the foundation year at the time. Later, I was hired full-time by the illustration department. After 10 years, I became the chair of the illustration department. And after 5 years, I rotated out and I became the director of the sequential art minor, which is what I still do.
Okay. So specifically comics related.
I teach comics plus.
Right.
Like, I teach illustration classes. I teach classes on subjects. For example, this semester I'm teaching a class called fantasy art, which is all fantasy genre illustration. I teach, like this semester I've been teaching a watercolor class. I teach a digital coloring class. And I teach the core classes too, sometimes, depending on what's needed. But yeah, and like any other full-time professor, I teach 3 classes a week, and our classes are long; they're 6 hours each, and then we have administrative duties, which go with being full-time. Like tomorrow, I'm going to go and meet and greet parents and students who want to come to MICA and tell them a little about the school, which I like to very much. So yeah, teaching keeps me busy. It's really fun. I have wonderful students, and it's very exciting to teach them both illustration and comics. It's really, really, really enjoyable to me.
Okay. Well, Jose, I don't know how we became Facebook friends a long time ago, but we somehow both love Alan Moore and Richard Corben. So,
see, I didn't know that, because I know you love Alan Moore, but I didn't know you love Richard Corben. I'm shocked to have 3 editions of 10.
Yeah. Well, I've got on my shelf back here. So my first 3 are the Alan Moore shelves, and then the next one down is mostly the Corben.
Oh my goodness! That's how I have them. My Alan Moore shelf next to my Corben shelf.
Yeah, because those are like the ones that I go back to the most often, and they're kind of the most important ones to me. And the Corben stuff has been so hard to find, and I'm really relieved, excited, glad, all those things about these new editions coming out. So, thank you for your incredible service.
I'm very glad. I'm very. How do you think the reception is going to be to the Corben stuff?
Well, like I said, I think it looks so good, and it's going to be more readily available than any of the previous editions. I think it's going to hit. I don't see how anybody could look at it and say it's And it's really, I mean, we talked about the art, but I mean, story-wise, especially the first Den is so emotional.
Yep.
Through the art and through the story and his whole psyche, Den's psyche, that I just think it resonates. I don't see how it couldn't hit with a lot of people. That's my personal feeling, but I'm really hoping it does well, so we can see the other Dens and the Undergrounds and Bloodstar as well.
Well, the goal is to reprint everything.
Yeah.
So, if everything goes well, I'd really want, if possible, I would like the 10 volumes to come out in more or less rapid succession. But I think that if everything goes well, the Arabian Nights would be next. But of course, we're also working. His daughter Beth, who was his colorist, was working with him on his final graphic novel that he never published.
Oh, that's right. It's what was it called?
Dimwood.
Yes, right. Dimwood, yeah.
And I offered to help, with anything. And so I'm gonna be helping finish it up when she's ready. Putting a little bit of rendering and some digital touches to the art to make it consistent to what her dad finished himself. So that's exciting. It's a really wild story. It's like, it fits in that world of the later stories that he was writing and illustrating, very like Lovecraft, New England.
Excellent.
But with the Corben chaos and sexuality and humor too. So it's really something. And I would like eventually to bring back Rip in Time and Jeremy.
Bodyssey's another big one. And I wonder about those. Surely Vertigo could put together those. I think he must have done 6 or 7 short stories in those Vertigo issues, those anthologies that they could probably put out a slim volume of some sort. There might be enough there.
Oh yeah, that's more than enough. That of course, that was done in Europe.
Oh, right. Okay, so it's already been done. Right. Interesting.
In France, they did, all the
Wolf Girl Eats and all those little shorts. Yeah, right. Okay.
All those were put together, and in France and Spain, they've been collecting both the Marvel and the DC stuff as
right. You're right.
Because of the auteur thing.
Yes. Oh, right. Yeah, of course.
Do you think I'm right about the auteur thing, or do you think
I think it sounds really accurate. It makes sense because if I think of Neil Adams, I think of Batman. I don't think of. I associate certain images with him, whereas if I think about Ray Pax or Corben or someone, it's a whole range of. It's all over the place. Yeah.
All over the place, and it's like basically whatever they would do, you would want to read because it was them.
Yeah.
And so it's like you wouldn't just buy like Valentina by Crepax. You would see anything else and you'd be like, this is interesting.
Another American artist that I think is kind of working that way is Jeff Darrow, who worked with Mobius and, did a lot of work in Europe and Japan. But he's also a guy that doesn't really have one character. It's just a range of stuff. And
well, he really has just one.
Oh, character. He does. Yes. Now he's certainly gotten there. But
I mean, he began by doing, but I don't think that. Although I have all my respect and admiration, and I've read it many times, but I don't think that Hardboiled or Rusty the Robot or whatever that was called, that was ever a big hit in comics.
No, I agree. That's the thing. I think he was a European guy. He's American who was treated like a European. Yeah. And
they're like absolutely mind-bending. I show them to my students.
Yeah.
They just go crazy.
Yeah.
They can't believe it. But I think that he's he's married to a French animator, and he's really so much more a product of that culture than of American comics culture, for sure.
Yeah.
So I think the new editions of then are gonna be humongously popular in Europe.
Yeah.
Like enormously popular. And I think that there is a new generation in Europe that hasn't seen his work that would respond very positively to it because, just the brilliance of it, how different it is from anybody else. It's like the just enormous power, visual power.
Yeah.
In the States, I don't know. I think that old timers are going to buy it and really, really like it. I don't know what the kids are going to say.
Yeah.
No idea.
All right. Well, let's leave it on that note of uncertainty.
Den Volume 1 Neverwhere by Richard Corben with recoloring by Jose Villarrubia is scheduled to be published by Dark Horse on August 9th. If you've enjoyed this week's show or any other Deconstructing Comics episodes, tell your friends, share your favorite episodes on your social media. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube by clicking our social media buttons at deconstructingcomics.com. You can help the Deconstructing Comics family of podcasts by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics. And go to deconstructingcomics.com to connect to us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, to shop on Amazon to support the show, and to find links to subscribe to the podcast. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and we'll critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. Next week, another MCU review that Mulele and I originally recorded for Patreon. It's 2017's Spider-Man Homecoming. See you then.